In January, in the OCDSB scope and sequence, we have chosen to start with a portion of Strand D, specifically data literacy and data analysis. This is covered in the overall expectation D1, which is manage, analyze, and use data to make convincing arguments and informed decisions in various contexts drawn from real life. Then we'll dig deeper into the specific expectation D1.6 for grades 7 and 8 only, as data will continue to be explored in more depth later in February and April, where students will select appropriate types of graphs, create and display graphs, create infographics, and much more. But as a starting point for about a week, we suggest focusing on analyzing data sets and looking at how data is organized graphically. It is essential that students have opportunities to work with, understand, interpret, and use data. It has become an essential life skill and requirement for an ever-expanding range of jobs and careers. Data is everywhere around us. This new data-intensive world can be difficult to navigate. Decisions that used to be straightforward are now more complex, requiring individuals to be constantly separating fact from fiction. In short, the need to analyze and interpret data is no longer confined to engineering or computer programming. It has become an essential life skill. Everywhere we turn, data is telling and weaving stories about our world. Let's take a closer look at the specific expectation D1.6 in grades 7 and 8. In grade 7, we can see that students are analyzing different sets of data presented in various ways, including circle graphs and in misleading graphs. They're asking and answering questions about the data, challenging preconceived notions, drawing conclusions, and making convincing arguments and informed decisions. In grade 8, the expectation is the same, except that students will be looking specifically at scatter plots. When interpreting a circle graph, the size of the slices or sectors will help indicate which category is greatest or least. Sometimes the actual amount is needed, and this will require the percentage to be multiplied by the total number of data values. All of the slices in a circle graph should add up to 100%. Looking at the angle of a sector can help in estimating the percentage that a sector takes up. Fractions can also describe the sectors of a circle graph. For example, if a sector takes up half of the circle, it would represent half of total data. When looking at scatter plots, they are used to determine if a relationship exists between two numerical variables. Analysis of the scatter plot requires identifying how closely the points form a line or curve in order to conclude that there is a relationship. For both grades 7 and 8, data presented in tables, plots, and graphs can be used to ask and answer questions, draw conclusions, and make convincing arguments and informed decisions. Sometimes presented data challenges current thinking and leads to new and different conclusions and decisions. Questions of interest are intended to be answered through the analysis of the representations. Sometimes the analysis raises more questions that require further collection, representation, and analysis of data. Sometimes graphs misinterpret data or show it inappropriately, and this can influence conclusions about the data. Therefore, it is always important to interpret presented data with a critical eye. Sometimes presented data challenges current thinking and leads to new and different conclusions and decisions. Questions of interest are intended to be answered through the analysis of the representations. Again, sometimes the analysis raises more questions that require further collection, representation, and analysis of data. In the intermediate grades, there are 3 levels of graph comprehension that students should learn about and practice. In level 1, information is read directly from the graph and no interpretation is required. In level 2, information is read and used to compare, for example, greatest or least, or perform operations like addition and subtraction. In level 3, information is read and used to make inferences about the data using background knowledge of the topic. A great way to get students to start exploring data sets and looking at how data is organized graphically is through visual images using data or math talks. This strategy is similar in structure to a number talk, but instead of numbers, students are shown a data visual and asked what interests them. In a data talk, the teacher does not have to be an expert in the topic of the data visualization. If a student asks a question, you can say that you do not know the answer, but would love to find out together. This is a nice opportunity to model not knowing and embracing uncertainty. Let's go through some of the great resources you will have access to in this newsletter and in the OCDSB Scope and Sequence. A link has been provided at the bottom of this newsletter to the UCube site, specifically for data talks. On the UCube website, created by Joe Bowler, there are a variety of data talk images appropriate for the intermediate grades. Here's an example of a circle graph that would be an engaging discussion starter for students. Another place to access rich visuals is on the website Ottawa Insights. There are a ton of graphs offering local data on topics such as basic needs and standard of living, health and wellness, environment and sustainability, and education and learning. At the bottom of this newsletter, you'll find a link to this site, as well as a slide deck organized into categories of data talk images. You could also check out Slow Reveal Graphs. The Slow Reveal Graph is an instructional routine that promotes sense-making about data. This highly engaging routine uses scaffolded visuals and discourse to help students make sense of data. As more and more of the graph is revealed, students refine their interpretation and construct meaning, often in surprising ways. Again, there is a link provided at the bottom of this newsletter. The last resource I will highlight is Graphing Stories. This site is a collaborative project by Dan Meyer and BuzzMath. On the website, you'll find short visual stories that help students learn to graph on a plane. Don't forget, all these resources and more can be found in the OCDSB Scope and Sequence for January by clicking on the Resources to Support tab. As always, if you have any further questions, please contact us at numeracy@ocdsb.ca.